Jai Shri Gurudev. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Ravi N, Assistant Professor, Department of MCom, BGS IMS, Chikaballapur. Dear students, in this video I am going to explain the concept accounts and records under GST. Accounts and records under goods and service tax. Before stepping to the topic accounts and records under GST resume, we should understand what is an accounting is. I think you might have know about what is an accounting is. See, in simple or in accounting terminologies, accounting is nothing but it is a just systematic process of identifying, recording, measuring, classifying, verifying, summarizing, interpreting and communicating of financial information to the different stakeholders, and that accounting reveals a profit or loss for a given period of time and the value and nature of a firm's assets and liabilities as well as the owner's equity. And this accounting is one of the key functions of almost all the business organizations. It may be handled by a single bookkeeper, that is an accountant at a small business firms, or by sizable finance departments with dozens of employees at a large companies. So this is what an accounting is. Just simply recording the transactions, day-to-day activities of the business in a books of accounts. That is accounting is. So, but in GST terminologies, what is that accounting? Just it is also a same thing, identifying a recording or keeping a record of all the transactions with relating to a goods and service tax in the respective books of accounts by the owner of the company or by the dealer, registered or unregistered dealer, or by the transporter. That is what an accounts under GST. And their records in the sense the keeping of transactions in a books of accounts for the future references. That is what records. So here a very registered person is required to keep and maintain all the records and at the principal place of a business in the sense at the head office, wherever the head office is located or main office is located or principal place is located. So there the company or any other person, registered person, required to keep the keep the books of accounts and has to maintain certain records for future references, okay, as per GST. And who must maintain accounts under GST? Who is required to be maintain books of accounts and records under GST in the sense? So here it is the responsibility of the following persons to maintain a specific records under GST. So here the first person who need to maintain accounts under GST is the owner. The owner in the sense the owner of any business organization, any kind of business organization, maybe a small scale industry or a large company or a partnership firm or whatever the business form it is or whatever the mode of business it is. So the owner of that such business organization has to maintain books of accounts under GST. And nextly, an operator of warehouse or godown or any other place used for storage of goods. Any person who is in charge with maintaining of the godown or any other place where the goods is being stored, that is I think godown or warehouse we can call, okay. Any operator of that godown or warehouse has to maintain the books of accounts under GST. Why? Because that is related to the goods and services, so that they has to maintain the books of accounts under GST. And nextly, the every transporter in the sense, say for example logistic companies are the examples for the transporters. So any transporter, it is required to be maintain a certain books of accounts, and they need to keep certain books of accounts and records. Okay, so these are the persons who is required to maintain certain books of accounts and GST. And every registered person whose turnover during a financial year exceeds the prescribed limit, that is 2 crore. If any business organization, or if owner or operator, or every transporter whose transaction that too in the financial year exceeds rupees 2 crore will get his accounts audited by a chartered accountant or by the cost accountant every year. Okay, so the person, that is registered person whose transaction value is more than 2 crore, that in financial year or in accounting year, that accounts must be audited by a chartered accountant or a cost accountant. Okay, so, but anyhow, so the owner of the owner or manufacturer or the operator of warehouse or the manager of that godown and every transporter has to maintain certain books of accounts under GST. And nextly, what are the accounts which must be maintained under GST? What and all the accounts is to be maintained? See, so I have listed the various accounts to be maintained that business need to be keep under GST. First one is input CGST account. CGST, which means Central Goods and Service Tax year account. So the input CGST account is to be prepared. Why this CGST account, input CGST, is to be prepared in the sense, so in order to record all the details with regarding input of CGST, what sort of CGST has been paid, in order to record such information or such a details, this account is to be maintained. As like that, output CGST also, output CGST account has to be prepared. And next account is to be prepared is input SGST, state goods and service tax account. And nextly, output state GST account. And input IGST means integrated goods and service tax account is to be prepared. And then output IGST account is to be prepared. So these are the accounts, and also along with this, electronic cash ledger also to be maintained. See, that electronic cash ledger to be maintained on government GST portal to pay GST. Why this is ECL, which means electronic cash ledger, is to be maintained andre, so they has to maintain that electronic cash ledger for the purpose of payment of GST through the GST portal, that is government GST portal. Along with this electronic cash ledger, all these accounts is to be maintained. See, even along with the purchase account, sales account, purchase returns account, sales returns account, so these accounts has to be maintained compulsorily to showcase their information or details with regarding GST. Okay, so every year they has to record, whenever the transaction is held in the business organization, they has to record each and every transaction in respective books of account where it is applicable, wherever the transaction is applicable. So in that account they has to maintain, they has to record, and they has to maintain that account for a longer period of time. Okay, and that must be presented in front of any required authorities. And nextly, what records must be maintained under GST? What records? See, the accounts is IGST account, CGST account, and SGST account has to be prepared. But what records is to be maintained under GST? So here are the some every registered person must maintain some records. What and all that records? So the records relating to a production or manufacturing of goods. So records is to be maintained with regarding production of goods or manufacture of the goods. And next record is to be maintained is that inward and outward supply of goods or services or both. So any information regarding inward and outward supply of goods and services, that has to be recorded in the books, that is to be maintained as a record. What sort of goods is being inward and what sort of goods is being outward supplied outward, and this is to be maintained in these inward and outward supply of goods and service record. And then stock of goods, the record is to be maintained for stock of goods. What sort of goods is maintained, whether stock of goods in the sense unsold goods. So in order to record that, stock of goods record is to be maintained. And then input tax credit availed, what sort of amount is availed as a input tax credit. I think you might have know what is input tax credit. So whenever one person or a dealer purchases something and he used to pay the tax to the seller, then if we sell the same assets to another person, another retailer or wholesaler, whoever it is, so then you will get back that amount of tax which is paid earlier to the seller. Okay, that is what input tax credit availed. So whatever the tax credited or availed as a input tax credit, in order to maintain, in order to record those information, so that's to keep record of input tax credit availed. And then output tax payable and paid. See, whatever the output tax paid or payable, so which is going to be paid, that has to be recorded, and those regarding information is to be maintained. And nextly, other particulars as may be prescribed, whatever the information prescribed under any amendment acts of GST, then they need to keep record of all those transactions in a books of accounts. So these are the records is to be maintained. And then electronic cash along with those books of accounts and records, so these electronic cash and credit ledger is to be maintained. I already explained you what is that electronic cash and credit ledger. So this is to be maintained to payment of the GST. See, every registered taxpayer will have 3 ledger under GST. So every registered, not unregistered, so only the registered taxpayers will have 3 types of ledgers under goods and service tax, so which will be generated automatically, electronically. So they will generated automatically, that 3 ledgers will be generated. So at the time of registration and will be maintained electronically. So once the record is maintained, once the transaction is held in the organization or in the transporter place or in the principal place of a business, so then automatically those ledgers will be automatically generated, and that will be maintained electronically itself. So electronically, only in electronic way, so those transactions will be maintained for a long run. And next, so in the herd we have 3 kinds of ledgers. So those 3 ledgers are, one is electronic cash ledger. What is this electronic cash ledger? See, this electronic cash ledger will serve as an electronic wallet, as like phone pay wallet or Google Pay wallet and Paytm wallet, like that. So in that Paytm wallet or phone pay wallet, what we do, so we will deposit a certain amount into that account and will keep maintaining that amount for if it is required, we'll pay through that e-wallet, right? So likewise, in this electronic cash ledger, it is serves as an electronic wallet, and the taxpayer will have to deposit money into his ledger, that too in cash ledger, and he has to add money to that wallet, and that money will be utilized to make the payments in future whenever payment is required. Okay, so whenever the payment has to be made, then he can use that wallet and they can pay. And so that they has to add some cash to this electronic cash ledger. Okay, periodically electronic cash ledger has to be credited with an amount. Okay, that person who is responsible to deposit an amount has to deposit periodically. And the second ledger is electronic credit ledger. So why it is prepared and why it is necessary? See, that electronic credit ledger is used to record the input tax credit and purchases will be reflected here. So okay, any input tax credit and purchases will be reflected in this electronic credit ledger, and there are 3 categories in that. So all the 3 categories, such as IGST or CGST and SGST. So we have 3 GSTs, right? So that IGST, CGST and SGST. So those three categories will be reflected in the electronic credit ledger. So the taxpayer will be able to utilize the balance shown in this account so only for the payment of tax, not for any payment of interest or not for any penalty payment and all those things. So but that amount which is reflected in the account called electronic credit ledger can be utilized to payment of only tax, that is GST. In order to pay the GST, so you used to maintain the cash or credit in the electronic credit ledger. And the last ledger is to be maintained is e-liability ledger. E-liability ledger. So liability in the sense it is one obligation, legal obligation. So in that ledger, so that it will shows the total tax liability of the taxpayer. So after netting off of the particular month, netting off for the particular month, so and this ledger will be auto generated. So see, all three ledgers is auto generated only, but e-liability ledger will show a liability of tax payment, what has to be paid at the year ending, what is the amount is to be paid as a tax amount, that will be shown. And usually under GST what happens, so every month they has to pay so that reason, so this ledger will shows the liability of tax payment. So after rounding off, which means netting off of the amount at the end of the month, it will shows a tax liability of a registered person. So in this ledger they used to maintain the tax liability, what is to be paid and the okay. So these are the three ledgers electronically maintained, and automatically these ledgers will be generated, and they has to maintain that electronic way itself. Okay. And nextly, what and all the accounts and records is to be maintained. So in different, and along with that first slide, so here we have some other accounts and records, and what account is what are the accounts is to be maintained and for what purpose, and who has to prepare that account, and by whom that account is to be prepared and maintained. So they will see that firstly accounts and records, and second column shows by whom. See, first one is register of goods produced. Register of goods produced. So this is one record. This is one account which is to be maintained by a registered person. What information this register of goods produced is included? What information is required to prepare this register of goods purchased in the sense? So in that ledger, in that account should contain details of goods manufactured in a factory or production house along with the HSN number. So definitely HSN wise on daily basis and at any given point of time they has to record. Okay, so the information is required to prepare the register of goods produced is that HSN wise details, the to daily basis, and goods, what sort of goods is produced in for factory or company, that has to be required, that is to be required to prepare this register of goods produced record. And by whom it is prepared? Every assessee carrying out manufacturing activity. So whoever the person who carrying out a manufacturing activity, they has to prepare register of goods produced. Okay, this is one record which is mandatorily prepared by taxpayer. And second record is, or account is, purchase register. We can also call this as a purchase account. Who prepared this? All assessees. Who has to prepare this purchase register? Every assessee. All assessees has to prepare this. And what sort of information required to prepare this? See, all the purchases made within a tax period for manufacturing of goods or provision of services having details of name of supplier and GSTIN number, invoice number, or date of that transaction, and name of state and category of purchases, and tax rate and tax amount, the two with bifurcation of CGST, SGST and IGST. So that has to be required, that is to be required to prepare this purchase register. So simply in order to prepare purchase register, the information regarding purchases, so where it is purchased, when it is purchased, from whom it is purchased, and what is the tax rate, what is the tax amount. So the two, see, whenever you going to record a tax amount, that must be segregated into IGST, CGST and SGST. Okay, so whichever is applicable. If only SGST is applicable, so just you can mention that. Okay, if all three GSTs is applicable, you have to mention. Okay, that is what purchase register. As like that purchase register, again sales register. So here also the same thing. So sales register, who has to prepare this? All assessees, and the same details is required to prepare this. So that is what with regarding sales. So sales made within a tax period must be maintained. So the two having details of name of the customer, so their name of name of the supplier will be recorded in the purchase register, but in the sales register, so we need to record the name of the customer, okay, to whom the sales is been made, and GSTIN of this customer, and invoice number or date whenever the transaction is held, whenever the sale is been made, that date is to be mentioned, and place of supplier, name of the state, category of sales, whether domestic sales or exports, so that has to be mentioned, and the tax rate, so applicable rate has to be mentioned, along with the tax amount by the two by bifurcation of CGST, SGST and IGST. Okay, and next register or next account is to be maintained is stock register. So stock register, so this is also to be prepared by all the assessees, stock register. So what sort of information is required to prepare this stock register? So this register should contain a correct stock of inventory, the two which is available on daily basis or at any given period of point of time, and such register shall contain a particulars of an opening balance of stock and receipt of goods, that supply of goods or goods which is lost, it may be in transit or maybe in godown, or goods stolen in the godown, or goods destroyed in the godown or warehouse, or return of any goods disposed by the way of gift or free samples and extra. So that has to be furnished to prepare this stock register. See, stock in the sense everything regarding goods which is not sold yet. Okay, so that has to be prepared. And next one is input tax credit availed, the account or record which with regarding input tax credit availed is to be prepared, to whom or by whom this account is to be prepared, by all the assessees. So by all the assessees, that has to be prepared, and that input tax credit availed register should maintain the details of input tax credit, the two which is availed for a given tax period, which having bifurcation of tax rate and tax amount, along with the category of inward, whether it is input or input service or capital goods. That bifurcation has to be mentioned in the tax register, that input tax credit availed register. And next, output tax liability. So in this also the register should maintain the details of GST liability. See that term itself explaining output tax liability. Liability means what is the obligation, what sort of GST is to be paid, what sort of GST liability is outstanding to be adjusted against input tax credit or cash, that has to be maintained. And next, output tax paid. So in that output tax paid, prepare the tax outpaid has to be prepared by all the assessees, and that should involve the information like GST paid for a particular tax period. Okay, and next, advance paid or received register, advance paid or register, received register. So that register should maintain details of advances received by the customers and paid to the suppliers, or adjustments made and tax paid are adjusted there too, has to be mentioned in that advance paid or received register of GST. And lastly, other records specified, any other records. If government government can further specify by way of notifications, by way of circulations. Periodically the government used to send some circulations or notifications to the GST payers or GST taxpayers. Periodically they used to send they used to specify the two by way of notification or additional records and accounts to be maintained. So they'll notify what sort of additional records is to be maintained, that to periodically they'll notify. Then what sort of accounts is notified by the government, that has to be prepared. So specific businesses are notified by the government. Okay, so these are the books of accounts or records which has to be maintained by the GST GST registered persons. Okay, and this topic is about accounts and records under GST. Hope you understand. Thank you all. Jai Shri Gurudev.